This is a Game Boy Advance.
Dear God.
But wait, there's more.
No.
This is Duke Nukem 3D. Now imagine if you could shove Duke Nukem 3D into a GBA. Well, guess what? That's not possible. So instead, what you got here is Duke Nukem Advance. Thrilling.
Holy cow.
Granted, there's a lot of concessions that you're going to have to make when it comes to paring a game such as Duke Nukem 3D down into the relatively confined space and limited processing power of a Game Boy Advance. On the storage front, the original Duke Nukem 3D was around 25 megabytes, so when it comes to the storage capacity of a cartridge, that's within the ballpark. But let's face it, that's not the bottleneck here. If you tried to play full-fat Duke Nukem 3D on a GBA, let's just say the chances of an electrical fire are greatly enhanced. So, what's the solution? Well, Taurus Games, developer of Duke Nukem Advance, thought, you know what? Let's not actually try to port Duke Nukem 3D, and instead, let's just create something in the vein of Duke 3D, but something that stands alone and can be more tailored to the confines of the GBA. And so we arrive at what you see here, the GBA version of Duke Nukem Advance. Much reduced level size, level geometry, destructibility, interactability, and notably, a lack of music. For all these drawbacks, however, it's still a wonderful technical achievement to see an FPS running on a GBA. Granted, it's not the first to achieve this. The very first instance of such was a title by the name of Backtrack, swiftly followed by X vs. Sever. Is that the film with Lucy Liu? Yeah, go figure. And of course, Doom had a punt as well, releasing about a year before Duke Nukem Advance. And as a method of playing Doom, yep, that certainly looks like a version of U1M1, but granted, this kind of thing would be one of few choices you might have had when it comes to video games back in the day, and let me just tell you, there are far worse ways of playing Doom. But if you want to revisit these, GBA emulators are a fantastic way to do so. For anyone else that would prefer a few more modern conveniences, however, when revisiting this particular entry, well, I'm happy to tell you that Duke Nukem Advance is now available as a total conversion, playable through source ports such as eDuke32. And holy moly, what a glow-up it is. If there's anything that makes me appreciate modern frame rates, it's going back and playing stuff that used to struggle on its native hardware, and then coming back to something this smooth. All I can say is these days we've got it pretty good. Now, one of the aspects of this TC that I've been trying to put my finger on is whether or not some of the level geometry has been jimmied somewhat. And what I mean by this is whether or not a level has been stretched a few bits sideways just to enable a little bit more movement and more room. However, on the flip side, this just could be a consequence of A, a higher resolution, and B, better FOV. Now, as I touched on earlier, Duke Advance is pretty much doing its own thing in terms of levels and story. It's definitely not seeking to recreate Duke 3D, and if anything, it feels more like it was intended as a companion piece to the likes of Duke Nukem Forever, which, when this came out, would have been very much in the middle of the hype cycle. That infamous 2001 E3 trailer that set everyone's imaginations aflutter, well, that would have very much still been in the back of everybody's minds. Heck, even the supporting character here is General Graves, who is most assuredly there in that E3 Duke Forever trailer. So, what exactly is going on in Duke Nukem Advance? Well, wouldn't you know it, those pesky cycloids have gotten into Area 51, and they seem to be prepping a fresh batch of their army to emerge from stasis. Thankfully, Duke is a bad enough dude to rampage through the immediate vicinity and put paid to that particular plan. This opening batch of levels will reintroduce you to some very familiar enemies, standard cycloid troopers, you got your pig cops, and then you've got the hybrid alien, which looks like a classic grey. These have the ability to not only hit you with a psychic blast, much like the Octobrains, but also resurrect the dead. All the better then that they turn out to be absolute pushovers. Something that I found neat in this initial batch of levels is that even though there's not as much environmental destruction going on that the build engine would typically be capable of, you've still got destructibility in terms of PC monitors and those aforementioned enemy stasis chambers, which can be quite pleasingly broken in the midst of a firefight. But yeah, this first batch of levels is relatively swift. You got some switch flip-in, some item collection, and mercifully, acquisition of weapons better than that default handgun. Granted, for the lion's share of this, it's going to be the pump-action shotty, but once you reach the climactic level and the first boss of Duke Advance, it will swiftly bump you up to the good old-fashioned RPG. Just nice to be on even footing when it comes to a rocket-slinging enemy. Also of note, Duke Advance doesn't actually recycle any pre-existing boss enemies from Duke 3D. All of the bosses in here appear to be Duke Advance exclusives. First one's not too tough though, and once you dispatch with them, it's off to figure out where the aliens have been storing the rest of the hybrid army. And wouldn't you know it, our next destination is Egypt. Yeah, Duke Advance is doing World Tour before World Tour. But yeah, you're here to do the same thing anyone else does in Egypt. See the temples, visit the ruins, fight some octobrains, wait what? But yeah, all of a sudden, a little bit more of the Duke roster start to turn up here in Egypt. You got your aforementioned octobrains, you got your enforcers. They pretty much work the exact same way that you used to, but the level layout here does start to get just a smidge more complex. Oh, and when referring specifically to the TC version of Duke Advance here, God forbid you die without a quick save near the start of the level, because one, it doesn't do it for you, and two, if you're unfortunate enough to have that happen, it's a pistol start for you. And let me tell you, these are not balanced for pistol starts. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt anywhere near as much if the Desert Eagle here in Duke Advance is worth a damn, but it ain't. But yeah, pro tip, make sure you drop a quick save, or at least make sure they're set up for you. This is not an issue in the GBA version, it just remembers. This level also introduces you to a fresh environmental hazard. You may have heard of toxic liquids or lava. I now introduce you to alien nacho cheese. There's also a fresh weapon to add to your armory during the course of this opening Egypt level, and that is the MP5. And I'll be honest, I'm missing my chain gun cannon. What gives? I mean, sure, it probably achieves the same effect, but visually, it just doesn't have that source.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Anyways, after a handful more skirmishes and a bit of crisscrossing back and forth across this level, it's on to the next. This one has you tracking some tech down across the course of the level that's foundational to turning off all the alien hibernation pods, and also, again, introduces a fresh weapon to the mix. Duke Advance actually does a pretty good job of adding at least maybe one new aspect per level just to keep things ticking over. In this case, you get your hands on the pipe bombs, which, in all honesty, I didn't use as much as I'd think I would. And you also get a fresh environmental hazard in the form of crushers later on down the line. Decent exploration here, lots of tight skirmishing, and honestly, you start to forget that these levels are foundationally based on GBA originals. If anything, they've got more of an old-school Doom flavor to them, which is probably why I enjoy them. Third level is the climactic one for Egypt, functioning as more of a gauntlet in the lead-up to the boss itself. Lots of enforcers to deal with, and unfortunately, I missed the cue where I could turn on this crusher here and make them all go squish. You got some keycard hunting, you got some nacho cheese spelunking, some good old-fashioned chain barrel detonating, and then of course, there's the boss itself. This is the controller. This one's got an interesting twist considering that you can't actually deal direct damage to it. So once you've dispatched with any of the adds in the immediate area, it's off to find a few switches, flip on a crusher, and use that to get the business done instead. I'm not gonna lie, it's not exactly the most scintillating boss fight I've ever experienced.
That's it?
But hey, I'm just trying to mentally transport myself to the experience of having to do this with GBA controls. Oh, this sucks. The third batch of levels leads us to the sunny shores of Sydney, Australia, and all I've got to say is it's nice to finally get back to a little bit of Duke-style urbanism, you know? As for why we're here, the last boss monologued a little too much about having a doomsday weapon to destroy the atmosphere, so yeah, even though that hibernating army's been dealt with, this kind of thing seems like it would take priority. I mean, after all, we don't need no aliens coming down here trying to destroy our environment. We're doing a perfectly good job of doing that ourselves, thank you very much. You see, I knew there was a reason why I have fond memories of this level. This is where you get the lead cannon, which visually is two pump-action shotguns glued together, but in practice actually functions more like a quad shotty. So yeah, this thing spits 4 shells out per pump, and all I can imagine is they just kind of forgot how shotgun tubes work. Whoa! Which, personally, I don't actually care that much about. All I care is if it puts down aliens real good, and you know what? Yes, it does. Anyways, we need to rampage through this cinema in order to find ourselves a keycard. Unfortunately, you're not going to get any titillation from a 3-frame GIF on the big screen, much like Duke 3D. But hey, they had to save room on that GBA cart where they could. Blue keycard grants access to the back of the grocery store, where the yellow keycard then grants us access to Flappers, because what would a Duke game be without a strip club? Sadly, because this was originally Nintendo, no tassels for you. Now, because up until now, all I've been dealing with is cycloids and nothing else, my first instinct was to, unfortunately, shoot my ally in the face, but thankfully they didn't take it personally. They share a bit of intel on some further nefarious alien plans, and give you a few pointers on where to use that keycard. Because next level features the one and only Duke Burger. I'll be honest, it feels a little empty without those pig cod tanks roaming around, and it's at this point you might notice that the enemy roster is a little lacking in Duke Nukem Advance compared to its predecessor. And again, this is a consequence of being able to fit everything down onto the GBA. A few cuts have indeed been made, so if you're hoping to see any Assault Commanders, any Battle Lord Sentries, Protozoid Slimers, Recon Patrol Vehicles, Turrets, Sharks, I'm sorry to say, they're on vacation right now. If you want sentry drones, all I got to tell you is you are sick in the head and you need help. Anyways, we managed to gain access to the Sydney Opera House via a vent in the back of a Chinese restaurant. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that's probably not the traditional method of ingress, but if you're kinda strapped for cash and you want to see a show, who am I to judge? If it works, it works. But all in all, not too much going on in this back end other than a nice little view of the skybox and a few more enemies to get rid of. The real meat of the Opera House is saved for an entire level all its own. Up until now, the format of these stages have been 3 levels, with the third having a boss fight right at the end. And this collection is where Duke Advance starts to buck the trend, because the Opera House level here is actually reasonably significant in its own right in terms of size and complexity, and I imagine was probably too much to merely tack on the boss fight right at the end. Instead, that's saved for a subsequent level, and we instead get to give ourselves a guided tour of the facilities. Yep, here's your problem right here. You've got an alien control center in the basement. It's, that's gonna cost you. The rest of the level here revolves around gaining access to the band pit in the main theater, and this grants the level a great excuse to have you essentially crisscross the building. It's got a real tangible sense of actually being, you know, what it's supposed to be. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, these levels are still recreations of what was available and doable on the Game Boy Advance version. If anything, the fact that they've translated so well into this much more palatable total conversion form is testament to what they were able to do with those heavy technical restrictions. By the way, if you want to bag yourself a cheeky shrink ray nice and early, if you do a bit of humping on these lockers here, that'll gain you access to this nice little secret round the side. Love me a shrink ray, though I do find myself pining for the ability to shrink down a Battle Lord. Red keycard grants you access to the rest of the building. There's a secondary theater where the band pit resides. And after a hop, skip, and a jump through a few teleporters, wouldn't you know it, there's the blue keycard that's needed to get through the door in the band pit. But yeah, there's just something about the Opera House level. It just feels really well put together. Next level's much more straightforward in comparison. Just need to flick the switches to turn off the Doomsday weapon, but oopsie-daisy, turns out they bluffed you out. You just turned it on! Now, despite this sudden cunning turn from the cycloids, they also helpfully left a bunch of shutdown switches neatly peppered throughout the level. But oh, don't get too cocky now, there's also a countdown timer, and you'll probably have plenty of time left by the time you get to all of them. Again, this is one of those situations where I feel like a few tweaks from the Game Boy version to this may have sufficed, because, let's face it, the control method on the GBA is nowhere near as, luxuriously smooth, let's say, as keyboard and mouse. Anyways, with Doomsday thwarted, there is only one last thing to take care of, and that is, of course, the boss. Definitely a more interesting boss to deal with than the one we had at the end of the Egypt section. This double-headed terror comes equipped with a pipe bomb launcher, which ricochets all over the shop, and can be fairly unpredictable what with those sections raising and lowering throughout the fight. But hey, this is Duke, and it's nothing that he can't deal with a few well-placed shots from the old lead cannon. After all that, where else is left to go but, of course, the alien ship itself. The main objective here is actually to destroy all alien eggs on the level, and that got me hopeful that I might see some Protozoid Slimers slopping about, but as I mentioned earlier, those enemy types are off somewhere on holiday. Instead, we get 2 protrusions peeking out from the top of the eggs, which can indeed fire a projectile right back at you. A fine compromise. A little bit of exploration here will also net you access to the freeze thrower, which unfortunately isn't anywhere near as rapid fire or indeed ricochetable as the original Duke 3D version, but it sure does turn enemies into meat popsicles. And yes, you can indeed shatter them with your mighty boot. Once you're done and dusted with the eggs, it's pretty much back to business as usual for the remainder of the level. Find keycards for the requisite doors, try not to die, you know, all of that good stuff. Thought the bit with the yellow key card was alright. It had a lot of blind spots for enemies to ambush you, keep you on your toes. By the end of this level, you'll be well acquainted with the klaxon alarm noise. Not that it hasn't featured in previous levels up until now, but boy, it does get a lot of usage through the next few, believe you me. Hope you didn't forget about the alien nacho cheese, because guess what? It's back on the menu, bitches. The overall objective for this one is to disable the ship's cloaking device, but the lion's share of what you'll be doing here is figuring out how to cross those aforementioned nacho cheese pits. Also, you'll still have a few more eggs to get rid of. No count this time, so I was wondering what the deal with that even was in the previous level. For some reason, I just found myself getting confused with the whole switch flipping thing that I was supposed to be doing here. You flip a switch, it raises the bridge, you cross the cheese, you move on to the other side. It should be that simple, but flipping the switch also lowers the previous bridge, stopping you from accessing that other section, which was giving me a little bit of a roadblock. Turns out, I just forgot to turn right. Seriously, I was trying anything other than going the correct direction.
I'm not a smart man.
Anyways, it turns out the level's actually really swift once you're not being an absolute idiot like I was, and all that's standing in your way between you and the exit is a few more encounters and a minor bit of switch flipping.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Now, for most of the levels here, things have been reasonably straightforward, but this one is hands down the most confusing layout in Duke Nukem Advance, and there's a few things that easily work against it. One, a lot of these rooms just plain look the same. Two, the navigation from one to the next through the vents is quite disorientating. Third, we've got the quite sudden introduction of these mini-me versions of the first chapter's boss, mercifully without rocket launchers. And fourth, you know those klaxons I was telling you about earlier? Yeah, they're back. So yeah, overall, a level I'd rather not have to replay given the choice, and guess what? I had to replay it because I forgot the quick save partway through. Life is pain! Mercifully, the klaxons shut off once you get General Graves hooked into the system, and oh god, they're on again! Seriously, just get me out of this friggin' level. Where's the exit? Where is the exit? By all accounts, the next few levels here are pretty hefty going. I guess it's to be expected. You don't exactly want this kind of thing to be a cakewalk. You're tasked with tracking down the vital signs of 4 human females, and as it happens, it's Agent Jenny. She was cloned, which is why she woke up naked in the Sydney Opera House. Definitely not a normal night out. But yet, in general, this level is out to hurt you in as many varied ways as possible, aside from the klaxons. Let's never talk about those again. There's these rooms fairly early on where you get a choice between switches. One of them will open the exit door, the other will just flood the room with enemies. Oh yeah, and this is practically a fondue factory in comparison to the rest of the levels featuring nacho cheese. We got rooms full of it, and you bet you're gonna have to do some platforming to get by it. Keep a low profile. There's literally a guy in front of me, Graves. Oh god, is that the friggin' klaxons again? So yeah, I kinda wrote off Graves' little statement about keeping a low profile as more of a that'd be kinda silly, wouldn't it? Having to avoid firefights. But no, this level gets hefty in a way that encourages you to just book it or use an alternative route to circumvent bunches of enemies. It runs completely counter to my instinct in this kind of game to just kill everything that moves. Heck, it even goes out of its way to explicitly state that that might be a good idea. It runs completely counter to my instinct in this kind of game to just kill everything that moves. But yeah, this is a level that is absolutely here to stick the boot in, and if its earlier sections don't convince you of that fact, then trying to battle against the rest of it will assuredly hammer the point home. It is designed to flatten you or drain you of ammo. One of the two. And just when you think you might have found some respite around the next corner, what do you know? There's a fresh batch of enemies. It just keeps going. It's relentless. Oh, thank God, I thought we'd never get there. me. All I can tell you about this level really is much like my diet, there's cheese at both ends and it's a nightmare in the middle. In all honesty, I am being a bit harsh on it. It's nowhere near as exhausting as the preceding level, and there is admittedly a nice little bit of outdoor splendor at the midway point of the stage. I just keep coming back to the notion that this is pretty much how it was in the GBA version, just with a drastically reduced resolution and demonstrably worse controls. It's the kind of thing that makes me wake up in a cold sweat at night. And I had Duke Advance for the GBA. I'm not surprised I never got around to actually finishing it. Anyways, we finally fight our way to Jenny 4, who is very relieved to see that she's being rescued. And then it's on to the penultimate stage. You heard me. Penultimate. Not ultimate, as in there's still one more after this. Yeah, the back end really goes the distance. Fittingly, I think I actually had the most trouble with this level. It wasn't so much of a slog as the one that shall no longer be named, but it just kept beating me down, man. And this was to a variety of factors. There was the composition of enemies, especially in this first area, that just kept steamrolling me. And then a little later on, the ammo fatigue started to kick in. I just didn't have enough to deal with what was in the room. I had to start getting a little creative with what order I took things down. But you know me, I'm stubborn if anything when it comes to these games, and death after death after death after death is still not enough to stop me from wanting to see the credits, because I've got this far, I might as well finish it. You know what's nice though? After all that struggle, you get this bit of dialogue with the big bad, where Duke calls him an ass goblin. You know, it's just the little things that make my day brighter, it really is. Naturally, all of the health that I was pining for was on the opposite side of this door, almost as if they knew the entire level up until there was going to be a massive pain in the ass. That and the fact that the boss is right here. Naturally, he's waiting in a shallow pool of nacho cheese with complete nonchalance, which is how you know he's evil. In terms of attacks, he seems to have a combo, the psychic blasts that you might see from an Octobrain or a Grey, as well as fireballs. He's actually not all that bad to deal with. Like I say, stay out of the alien nacho cheese, keep peppering him with rockets, few shotgun blasts to finish the job, and look, he's armless. Granted, I can imagine trying to strafe against this thing using GBA controls, and yeah, no thanks. There's one last Jenny to add to the collection, and you know how I said this was penultimate? Yeah, there's an escape sequence level. This one's on a timer, I guess for a sense of urgency, you know, aside from everything else exploding around you, and I didn't really feel all that compelled to get rid of everything on the way out, because hey, they're gonna be exploding anyway. So yeah, I finished with like more than 2 minutes left on the clock, and boy oh boy, I can tell you how grateful I was to finally see the back of those levels. Nothing could possibly, oh my god, it's the friggin' klaxons. Why do they have to use the klaxons? Why are they so loud?
Hail to the king, baby.
All I can tell you is I hope he treats the Jenny clones better than he treated the twins in DNF.